Begin by removing the jig from the fret and then by adding 2 support strips which are slightly thicker than the planking and provided to prevent the jig from warping. Apply glue along the thin edge of one of these and line it up with the edge of the jig. Press the support strip into place, ensuring it is on the underside of the jig. Now add the second strip to the other side of the jig and then leave this to dry using clamps or a weight to keep the assembly flat where necessary. Carefully separate the remaining parts from the carrier sheet, noting that parts 17 to 22 are not used until later on in the process. So set these aside for safekeeping and just gently clean up any edges of the parts that have been removed from the fret, including those on the jig. Once the parts are cleaned up, we're going to start by taking parts 1 and 2 and both parts 3 and applying a little glue to the small tab on one of the 2 part 3s. Press the tab into the matching slot in part 1, then repeat for the second part 3. Push both up to the top of the slots. Apply a little glue to the tab on the end of part 2 and insert it into slot 2 in the jig facing in the direction shown. Apply glue to the tab on the base of frame 1 and press it into slot number 1. Apply a spot of glue at the point where the curved end of part 2 touches the Now glue the tab on the base of frame 4 and press it into slot 4, ensuring that it is fully seated on the assembly jig and that the frames 3 and 4 are parallel. Continue adding frames in this way, ensuring that they are in the correct numbered slots and are parallel. Now fit part 15 at right angles to frame 14 so that the sloping side of part 15 faces slot 16. Apply a little glue to the sloping side of part 15. Now apply glue to the tab on the base of part 16, the transom of the stern of the launch. Note that this one side of the part 16 has the number and also a line marked on it. Fit the transom into slot 16, leaning over against part 15 and hold it in place until the glue is dry. Before we start planking, we need to start fairing the hull. So gently start sanding away at the U-shaped frames so that they form a smooth curve with no hard edges. Be very gentle when sanding the 2 bow supports, which are parts 3, as the upper ends are unsupported. The planks forming the hull of the launch are curved, and although the strips of wood supplied are flexible enough to bend, they will try to spring back straight. One of the ways that we can make this a lot easier is by adding steam, and this is by using the kettle method as shown here. Now bend a plank to fit the bow to stern, so it sits on the steps in the frames following the slight up and down curve without being forced. Cut the bow in line with the centre of frame 2 as shown being marked out here. Now apply glue and hold the plank in place until the glue sets. Repeat on the opposite side. Note how the planks are touching at the bow, but are left over length at the stern. You may want to remove these with some sharp cutters. Before bending the second layer of planks, sand one end to produce a gentle taper, as shown in this step. Now bend and fit the second layers of planking in the same way as the first, tapering towards the bow as shown. Taper the end of 2 more planks as shown, and then trying them in position as seen in here, so that they follow the shape of the bow. Make the centre of the stern transom and bend the first plank to follow the centre line from bow to stern, as seen here. Glue the plank in place, lining up the tapered end of the bow. Shape another plank and glue it onto the opposite side. You will need to start to taper the end of the next planks to fit the spaces remaining. This is a matter of sanding down a bit at a time and trying them into place. Repeat the process on the opposite side of the hull, and the final planks need to be tapered at both ends to fit into the gaps. You may find that the gap is a little too wide to fill with one plank. This is perfectly normal, and if it happens on your model, cut thin slivers, which are known as stealers, to fit in the gaps. Lightly sand the outside of the hull to a smooth finish, but be very careful not to go through the thin planking. Now bend and glue an extra layer of planks on top of the first 2 planks you laid, running along the step. Leave the hull to dry thoroughly. If any cracks remain, run a little glue into the gap and sand lightly when dry. After the assembly has completely set, it's time to separate the hull from the jig. Cut the frames below the lower planks, either using a sharp pair of side cutters or a fine razor saw. Do not attempt to cut too close to the planking, as you will risk splintering the edge. The surplus frames will be trimmed later. The completed hull has parts of the assembly jig still attached to the U-shaped ribs. Using a sharp modelling knife, cut off the surplus at an angle of about 45 degrees so the ends slope inward. Cut right across the transom. Using the marked lines as a guide, be very careful not to remove too much. You may find it easier to leave some surplus and finish off by sanding it away. Smooth off the ends of all the ribs using the fine abrasive paper or a very fine file. Try the keel, which is part 18, in place. If it does not fit easily over the curve of the planking, you may need to sand the hull slightly to ensure that there are no gaps. Apply a little glue to the inside of the keel where it will touch the hull, then fit it back into place. Clamp the keel in place until the glue has dried, using pieces of scrap wood to spread the clamp pressure as shown. Cut a 17mm length of one of the spare planking strips. Split it lengthwise into 3 equal strips. One of these is a spare. Mark the position of the rubbing strips as shown on page 31 of your instructions, and then with the rubbing strips curve them down, sanding them down at the edges before we start to apply glue onto the edges. Gently bend the strips along the thin edge so that when we place them down onto the bottom of a launch they sit nicely with the curvature. Check that the strips fit without being forced into shape. And once you've applied the glue, press the rubbing strips into place following the lines you marked in steps 11 and 12 and hold until the glue sets.